I want to begin with a story that, for reasons that will soon be clear, probably hits closer to home for me than for most of you, so humor me. In his spiritual autobiography titled How Christ Came to Church, A.J. Gordon, a 19th century Boston Baptist minister and founder of Gordon College and Gordon Conwell Seminary, tells of an experience that affected his entire life and ministry. It was late one Saturday night. He was exhausted from preparing Sunday morning sermon, and he fell asleep and had a dream. And in his dream, he was standing in the pulpit of his church before a packed congregation, and just as he was about to begin his sermon, he looked out and saw a stranger slowly coming up the aisle, looking to his left and right for a place to sit. Halfway up the aisle, a gentleman Gordon knew stood up and offered the stranger a place to sit next to him in the pew. Gordon didn't remember the face of the stranger, but he remembered his clothes, humble, poor, and plain. And as he preached, the stranger gave him the most respectful attention from beginning to end. And though Gordon would look at the other faces in the congregation during his 30-minute sermon, he found that his eyes kept returning to the stranger. He was trying to figure out who this man might be. His plan was to meet the man immediately after the service, but after the closing benediction, alas, the departing congregation filled the aisles and made it impossible for him to get to the stranger before he was gone. Well, the gentleman who offered his seat was still there, and so he went over to him and asked, "Can you tell me who that stranger was who sat in your pew this morning?" And the gentleman replied in a casual, matter-of-fact tone, "Don't you know him? It was Jesus of Nazareth." With great disappointment, Gordon complained to him, "Well, why'd you let him go without introducing me to him? I really wanted to speak with him." The gentleman replied again nonchalantly, "Oh, don't worry. He's been here today. No doubt. He'll come again." And at that moment, a flood of emotion rushed over Gordon. He began trying to recall the content and delivery of his sermon. Had I preached on some catchy popular theme just to tickle the ears of those listening? No. I had preached Christ and Christ crucified. But how did I preach him? Was I talking about Christ while still magnifying myself? And what did he think of the sanctuary? The Gothic arches and the stained glass windows, the expensive organ. Was he impressed with the music, the order of worship? At that moment, he thought he would never care again what anyone else thought of the preaching or the worship or the church building, if only he could know that the stranger hadn't been displeased, or that he wouldn't refuse to return because he didn't like what he saw. Gordon was hit to the core. I mean, here had been Jesus present in his church. Jesus could have told him everything he had ever wanted to know. He could reveal to Gordon his real self, who he truly was. He could correct the errors of their worship to which long usage and tradition had rendered him insensible. He could have told him all this and infinitely more. And yet his eyes beheld him, and he knew him not. Now he was gone. But one final thought hit him in his dreaming state. The words of the gentleman lingered in his mind. He's been here today, no doubt. He'll come again. And as he repeated those lines over and over and over again, he finally woke up, and it was all a dream. And he concludes his story with this. Can you take me back to the beginning, Angela, so I can show the quote? Well, maybe not. I'll just read it to you. He says this: "No, it was not a dream. It was a vision of the deepest reality, a miniature of an actual ministry, verifying the statement often repeated that sometimes we are most awake toward God when we are asleep toward the world. Sometimes we are most awake toward God when we are asleep toward the world. We are in a series titled Everyday Spirituality. And in this series, we are looking at the stuff of everyday life, the practices we engage in almost every single day. And we're asking the question, what does this have to do with God? What does this have to do with our life with God? If we were made for relationship with God, to walk with Him at every moment of every day, what does it mean to walk with Him when we work and eat? When we shop and play? What does it mean to live with God in the everyday stuff of life? So last week, if you were here, we began by looking at sleep. And this morning, we're going to continue in the sleeping state. Specifically, we're going to look at our dreams. Are you ready? Our dreams. Now, similar to sleep, humans have long been trying to explain what is going on when we dream. One of the oldest theories, held in various forms by ancient Greek, Chinese, and Indian cultures, is that when we dream, our soul, or at least a part of our soul, actually leaves the body and enters into some non-physical, spiritual, awakened realm or state. And because of this, dreaming was long thought to be one of the best ways to receive communication from the gods. There's been a long history of practicing what is called incubation, where you sleep in or near a holy site, a temple perhaps, in the hopes that your nearness to the gods will make it more likely for you to receive divine communication in a dream, guidance for life, a glimpse into the future perhaps. Now, this wasn't the sole perspective on the matter in the ancient world. Greek philosopher Aristotle was a bit of a killjoy when it came to dreams. He denied the possibility of dreams being sent by the gods, and frankly, he had no room in his philosophy for anything beyond the world of sight and sense. And so his theory was that our dreams are simply, and if you ask me quite boringly, quote, the residual impressions left upon the soul by the previous day's activities. Some fairly sophisticated dream theories emerged among Christian theologians and philosophers in the first 4 centuries AD or so, which I don't have time to get into. But one of the things they talk about is that dreams can be an arena for an attack by the devil, tempting you to do things that you'd never do when you were awake. This bothered, for instance, St. Augustine quite a bit. He found himself able to control himself and some of his urges during the day, but then he'd doze off and in his dreams give himself wholeheartedly to them, quite enthusiastically, he says. He actually notes that those kinds of dreams feel remarkably similar to the act itself. Do you know what kind of dreams he's referring to? Have any of you had those kinds of dreams? You liars! You liars! You know you have. Well, good news, in case you're feeling guilty, you should feel guilty about lying directly to my face just a moment ago, but if you are feeling guilty because you've had the kinds of dreams that I'm talking about, which for politeness sake I will not name, I did read another church father. I actually think it came to mind. I didn't remember first service. I think it was John Chrysostom. And he argues that, yes, it's unfortunate when you sin in a dream. Of course, none of you have ever done this before, so it's not a big deal for you. But if you have, you needn't feel guilty about upon waking for this simple reason. This was his logic. If you don't get to commend yourself for some act of nobility in a dream, if you don't get a crown on your head for some act of bravery in a dream, then neither should you be held accountable or feel guilty for some act of shame. That's for other people, not for you, because you guys have never sinned in a dream. Okay, so here's the point. I don't need to apologize for anything I've ever done in a dream, and neither do you. I will say that I have had to apologize for things I did in my wife's dream. I don't know if this has happened to any of you, but I wake up in the morning and she's clearly mad at me. She won't even look me in the eye. And then I find I committed some terrible act of betrayal in her dream, and I spend the next 20 minutes profusely apologizing. Anyways, dreams can be an arena for attack by the devil. Some more modern theories include the threat simulation theory. So the idea behind the threat simulation theory is that dreams replicate threats to our survival so that we can practice our response to them before they actually happen. I don't know about you, but if this is the case, my dreams are failing me big time. If anyone tries to attack me in real life, I've been taught through my dreams to run away in slow motion, right? Another theory, the activation synthesis theory. So in this theory, our brainstem randomly activates during the REM state, giving our brains random data, random emotions, random sense experiences. And then our brains try to piece together the data in some meaningful, slightly coherent story. Other theories suggest that dreams help us consolidate and fix memories. They help us process emotions. And of course, one of the most popular theories, ever since Sigmund Freud, is that dreams allow us to act out our deepest desires in a safe setting. Dreams are the arena for our unconscious wish fulfillment. Our dreams access those deeper and largely unnoticed energies and desires that drive much of our waking lives. So which is it? What is a dream? We're going to get to the Bible in a moment because the Bible actually has quite a bit to say about dreams. But before we do that, let me just say this. What I learned about dreams in the past few weeks has really rocked me. To be honest, throughout my life, I've never really paid attention. I've heard some people occasionally, randomly, maybe one time in their life, having some sort of meaningful, inspirational dream. It wasn't until the past couple weeks, as I studied for this sermon, that I realized the absolutely critical role that dreams have played in the lives of so many Christians throughout history. Just to give you a few examples, the early 3rd century North African Christian Perpetua had a dream while she was imprisoned for her faith. She was climbing up a ladder, there's a dragon down below. And anyways, in this dream, she received the courage she needed to face her martyrdom. The young age of 21. Eastern Father Gregory of Nyssa, Eastern Church Father Gregory of Nyssa had a life-changing moment in a dream. What happened is that he had just attended a celebration for a group of Christian soldiers who died in a freezing pond while holding fast to their Christian faith. I'm not sure the exact story behind that, but anyways, the following night after he went to this celebration, he had a dream and these soldiers came to him and they just started beating him up for his Christian laziness, for his lack of devotion and commitment. And from that moment on, because of the dream, he gave himself more passionately to Christian devotion and practice. It changed his life. Another Eastern father, another Gregory actually, Gregory of Nazianzus had a dream. And in this dream, 2 maidens approached him. And he said they were filled with warmth and affection. And he asked their names, and they said their names were Temperance and Virginity, actually. And they promised him, as he began dialoguing with them, that if he would allow his mind to mingle with theirs. So if he was to become of the same mind with them, that they would lead him closer to the light of the immortal Trinity. And when he woke up, he gave himself to a life of singleness and simplicity to devote himself more exclusively to Christ. Christian scholar Jerome had a dream in which Jesus challenged his obsession with books and Greek classic literature, and as a result, he dedicated himself more exclusively to the study of Scripture. And the fruit of that dream was his translation of the Bible into Latin, along with a number of New Testament commentaries. Major accomplishment in the ancient world. Dreams played a role in the rejection of Arianism, a theological heresy that denied the full deity of Christ. Today, dreams play a significant role in the conversion of Muslims to Christianity. In 2 different studies I looked at, between 27 and 37 of believers with Muslim backgrounds claim to have had a pre-conversion dream. And these dreams, in which Jesus usually appears and says something like, "I love you," or he invites them into discipleship, those dreams, those pre-conversion dreams, play a significant role in their conversion to Christianity. And it's not just the individual lives of Christians or what happened in church history that dreams have played a critical role. I don't know if you know this, dreams have dramatically shaped world history. In 332 BC, the Jewish high priest Jadis had a dream, and in this dream, he was told to open the city gates of Jerusalem the very next day and go out in his full priestly robes to meet none other than Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was on a conquest there with his army, eager to sack and destroy Jerusalem. But when he saw the city gates open and Jadis come out to meet him, he did something that totally took his soldiers by surprise. Alexander the Great ran over to Jadis, knelt down, and paid homage to him. And his soldiers thought he had gone mad, but then he explained to them that back when he was in Macedonia, shortly before the conquest journey began, he himself had a dream. And in that dream, he saw a man he never knew wearing these robes that he had never recognized before come to him and talk to him and ensure the safe passage of his army to the continent of Asia. And so, because of these two dreams, Jerusalem was spared by Alexander the Great. 600 years later, in 312 AD, Constantine was fighting his rival Maxentius for sole possession of the rulership of the Roman Empire. And before the fateful Battle of Milvian Bridge, he had a dream in which a strange symbol appeared to him, a combination of two Greek letters, chi and rho. If you want to know what it looks like, ask David and Sadie to show you their arms. Anyways, unbeknownst to him, it was an occasionally used Christian symbol representing the first two letters of the Greek word for Christ. And he was told in the dream that if you placed this symbol on the shields of his soldiers, victory would be his. He followed the order, and under that insignia, he defeated Maxentius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge and soon after converted and ultimately legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire. A more recent example comes from 1944, World War II. During World War II, American General George Patton received military intuitions about the timing of German attacks through his dreams, according to his secretary, who lived with him. He received key strategies that ensured the defeat of the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge. Because you're second service, you get a few extra that I didn't share with the first service. Greatest Roman physician Galen, revered throughout the ancient world as the greatest physician of all time in the ancient world, once performed an operation on himself at the bidding of a dream. Apparently it worked. He actually received many of his cures and ideas for surgery because of his dreams. Now, I prefer my doctors to go to medical school, but anyways, apparently it worked. Ambrose, the Bishop of Milan, here's another one, once summoned up the courage to call the Emperor Theodosius to repentance at the bidding of a dream. Now, I just spent a lot of time telling you stories of dreams, and here's why. Here's what I want you to understand. Dreams seem to be quite important. We do well to pay attention to them. Let's finally turn to the Bible. According to the Bible, dreams are of four kinds, and this doesn't mean there aren't more, but there are. These are the ones that are mentioned in the scriptures. First, there are dreams that are normal or unremarkable, that just have to do with our own physical states. Isaiah 29:8 indicates this kind of dream, just as when a hungry person dreams of eating and wakes up still hungry, or a thirsty person dreams of drinking and wakes up faint, still thirsty, so shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. So this passage is not teaching us about dreams per se. This passage is actually about the pointlessness of Israel's enemies attacking Jerusalem, Mount Zion. But you'll see here that dreaming is used as an analogy for that point. And Isaiah here is recognizing the kind of dream that arises from your physical state or circumstance. There isn't any deeper meaning. A hungry person dreams of eating, of course. A thirsty person dreams of drinking, of course. Our physical state often prompts such normal, unremarkable dreams. So you have to pee, and lo and behold, in your dream, you're peeing, right? And then you wake up and you're still peeing, right? I've been told by a friend. Anyways, there are dreams that are unremarkable and just arise from our natural physical state. There are dreams that are false. So in the Bible, there are two ways in which a dream might be false. One way is that the dreamer is just lying, just making things up. So some of the Old Testament prophets, we won't turn there, but some of the Old Testament prophets warn against these fake dreams and fake dreamers. The second way that a dream might be false is that the dream itself is real, but its intention or its message is intended to deceive people and lead them away from God. So Deuteronomy 13, verse 1, if a prophet or a dreamer of dream arises among you and gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. So what he's saying here is that a dreamer has a dream, perhaps of the future. He tells people that's the sign, and then the sign comes to pass. The dream comes true. But then the dreamer uses that to lead people away from God and back into polytheism. It's a false dream. Jeremiah in chapter 29 warns of these kinds of dreams. The dream is real, the message is false, right? So the point here is that you don't simply take dreams as being automatically from God or as necessarily revealing truth. There's a discernment process that has to take place. Third, in the Bible, there are dreams that reveal the heart. So I'm going to show you a dream. It comes from the Old Testament. It's a dream report from a young woman who's in love. It's very obvious. And she's not married yet. She's likely engaged. This comes from the Song of Songs, chapter 3. Here it is. Upon my bed at night, I sought him whom my soul loves. So just look at those opening two lines. This does not mean that she's laying in bed, searching under the covers or under her pillow for her lover, right? He's not 3 inches tall. No, she's talking about a dream. She is in bed at night, and in this dream, she is searching for her beloved. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. She says to herself, I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The sentinels found me as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. So she finds her man, finally, drags him to her mother's house. Presumably her mother's not home. Again, this is a dream. And notice, this is actually the end of the dream report. She doesn't actually tell us what happens when she gets to the chamber, to the bedroom, right? But I'm guessing it wasn't for Bible study. You guys really need to loosen up. This is the Bible, not me, okay? I'm thinking this wasn't to do a crossword puzzle. This is why, by the way, in case you doubt me, this is why she stops her dream report, doesn't tell us anymore, and then she says this immediately after. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles of the wild does, do not stir up or awaken love until it's ready. This dream she's just had is a powerful expression of her desires, and that's why she pleads with her fellow girlfriends, the daughters of Jerusalem, to not stir up or awaken love until it's ready. She's just had a powerful, and let's admit it, sexual dream. 2 chapters later, she actually has another dream, and I won't show you that dream, but in this dream, in chapter 5, her lover comes to her door, knocks on it, and says, open up, let me in. And for whatever reason, she gives some lame excuses, but she stalls in getting up to answer it. When she finally gets up and opens the door, he's gone. And then she goes searching throughout the city, in the streets at night, looking for her beloved. And this time she encounters those same watchmen, the sentinels, and said, this time they beat her up. And that's how the dream report ends. So in that dream, and you can feel free to read it on your own, her anxiety about the relationship comes out, right? Her fear that they're gonna miss each other because of bad timing. Her fear that perhaps even the community won't approve and will become an obstacle to their relationship. That's what I think is going on with the part of the dream where the sentinels begin beating her up. Now, both of these dreams in chapter 3 and chapter 5 of Song of Songs don't come from God, right? They come from the dreamer's heart. They come from her desire, her anxiety, her fear. They come from the heart. Fourth and finally, there are dreams that come from God. Now, there are a lot of these dreams in the Bible, far too many examples for me to go through. I read through 28 different dream reports in the Old Testament alone that come from God. I want to show you 2 of them, very different from each other in tenor. The first comes from Genesis 20, and in this dream, just to set the scene, Abraham has just lied and told the king of Abimelech, in whose kingdom he is staying, that his wife Sarah is just his sister, and she's gone along with it. So the king has taken Sarah as his own. And here's what happens. So God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you are about to die because of the woman you have taken, for she is a married woman. Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent people? Didn't not he, Abraham himself, say to me, she's my sister, and she herself said, he's my brother. I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands. Then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I didn't let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours. So this is a pretty scary dream, isn't it? I've had people threaten to kill me in dreams. To date, I have never had God threaten to kill me in a dream. That sounds pretty frightening. But here, God uses this dream, a nightmare of sorts, to warn Abimelech so that Sarah is returned to Abraham and the family is restored. You see that? The negative or nightmarish dreams that come from God in the Bible typically, I think almost exclusively, come to people in power. So Pharaoh, to give you another example, is warned in a dream about an upcoming famine in Egypt, which will severely squeeze the Egyptian economy. The king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, actually has two dreams. One of them is a dream about the destruction of his own kingdom. He then has another dream about his mental health. The dream actually foretells his descent into madness for a season. Sure enough, it comes to pass. So those are negative, discouraging, nightmarish type dreams that typically come to people in power. A second kind of dream, very different in tenor, from God is found in Genesis 28. This was the passage that you heard read earlier. And the context is that Jacob has just had to flee his brother Esau, who wants to kill him. And while Jacob is on the run, he stops, nightfall hits, he lays down his head, verse 12. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So this, I think, is a picture, a symbolic picture of the nearness of God, the accessibility of God and of heaven. The Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So notice that when Jacob is on the run, feeling so vulnerable, God gives him this dream and says, I am near, I am accessible, and you have a future. Right? These are encouraging or positive dreams, dreams that give hope, dreams that speak of a wonderful future. And typically, they're given to people without power when things are not looking so good. Just to give you a few other examples, in Genesis 15, Abraham, the patriarch, has a dream in which God affirms his promise of descendants, even though at the time Abraham doesn't have a son, he's getting old. In Genesis 26, Isaac, his son, has a dream in which God promises to protect him and bless him right after he gets driven out of the land he's living in the land of the Philistines. So God speaks words of hope through dreams. Just to give you a few other kinds of dreams that happen from God, God initiates a relationship with the young Samuel through a dream. God gives assurance and guidance to Joseph in the New Testament, the husband of Mary, through dreams. Paul, the apostle, is led to plant churches in Macedonia, a place he wasn't really thinking about, because of a dream, according to the book of Acts. You get the idea. There are dreams that come from God. So what does this mean for us exactly? Here's what I think it means. It means this. I know we've gone through a lot. Pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to your dreams for at least two reasons. The first reason is that in our dreams, and as we pay attention to them, we can actually learn quite a bit about ourselves. You know, if the church father, John Chrysostom, was correct, then you may not have to repent of anything you do in a dream. You may not need to say you're sorry or confess anything that happened in your dream, but it is the case, whether you're tempted in a dream or whatever happens in the dream, it is the case that often what is really going on in your heart of hearts, deep beneath the surface, comes out in the dreaming state. Your desires, your passions, your fears, your aggressions and anger, your pain and hurt. And this is why I think paying attention to our dreams can actually help aid us in our sanctification, in our transformation, in our growth as disciples of Jesus. One of the major obstacles to our sanctification, one of the major obstacles to our personal growth is that we don't know ourselves nearly as well as we think we do, right? If you say that you trust in God with all of your heart and don't lean on your own understanding, but you consistently have anxious and fearful dreams, it's likely the case that God still has some strengthening to do in your faith. If you say you've forgiven someone and moved on from that past situation, but you find yourself still acting out vengeance or recycling the pain and hurt in your dreams, it's likely the case that God still has some healing to do in your heart. Dreams can help us recognize those very real energies and emotions and desires that drive so much of our waking lives. And then once we pay attention to those, we can bring them before God in prayer. We can bring them into the light of Christian community, and we can begin moving forward. The second reason we ought to pay attention to our dreams is simply so that we can open ourselves more to God. In Acts 2, Peter declares in his Pentecost sermon that what the prophet Joel foretold has come to pass in the age of the church. And what is that? We looked at this in the fall when we were studying Acts, is that your sons and daughters, he said, shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. And what we talked about is that young and old men and women, people of all classes, of all types, God is just going to pour out his communication upon them in this age that is the church. Through prophecy, visions, dreams. To use maybe a slightly corny phrase that I heard so many years ago, God is way more talk than we are listen. God is way more talk than we are listen. Is it possible that he's trying to get our attention in tons of ways? But so often we don't pay attention. You know, one of the interesting things I found out as I was studying this, an interesting observation made by brain scientists, is that during the REM state, during the dreaming state, the brain is wildly active. In fact, it has the same sort of activity that you would see in the waking state, but the prefrontal cortex, that front part of your brain, that it basically plays the executive function. It's responsible for decision-making, planning, moderating behavior. Psychologists connect this to what they call the ego. It relaxes and exhibits decreased activity during the waking or during the dreaming state, which this is likely why things that are impossible to believe when we're awake seem perfectly reasonable when we're asleep, right? And I wonder whether this is not just why our unconscious desires and anxieties and aggressions come out in our dreams. I wonder if this is why God would see fit to use our dreams to communicate to us. When King Abimelech is awake, when his prefrontal cortex, his ego is fully firing, there's no way he can believe his life is under threat by the presence of Sarah. That makes no sense. He's the king. When Pharaoh is awake, there's no way he can believe that the economy of Egypt is out of his control. He's a son of the gods. He's Pharaoh. When Nebuchadnezzar is awake, there's no way he can imagine the destruction of his own kingdom, let alone the destruction of his own mind. But when those in power sleep, when their prefrontal cortexes relax, when their egos subside, God can speak a word of truth that would otherwise seem impossible. When Abraham sleeps, God tells him what he otherwise can't believe, that children indeed are coming. When Isaac sleeps, God tells him what he can't otherwise believe, that blessing is his. When Jacob sleeps, God tells him what he otherwise can't believe, that he'll be safe and he has a future. When Joseph sleeps, God tells him what he can't otherwise believe, that yes, indeed, Mary's child was conceived by the Holy Spirit. Pay attention, church, to your dreams. Because God might be trying to use them to tell you what you otherwise would deem impossible. what your prefrontal cortex, your ego, would disregard and you'd never believe when you're awake. Even in our dreaming, we are beckoned into life with God. Let's pray.